Testing, testing. One, two, three. Hey, everybody. Um, I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I just wanted to say welcome to anyone who's here watching and or watching in the future. Because I am recording this, and actually I should start recording. That's a good plan. Um, but yeah, thanks to everyone who is joining. And I'll just wait a couple more minutes. I know the timer on screen says 0, but I'll just take that away and maybe add in the chat just in case anyone wants to join in. But I should get on with what I wanted to talk about. I'll just leave this up on the screen for now. Um, but I wanted to say to all my subscribers that I'm a bit sorry that I haven't been posting for the last maybe couple of years, actually. And I know I've been posting recently, but it's not anything like a tutorial or anything like that. So this is hopefully going to make up for that, and I kind of want to keep doing this maybe semi-regularly. I don't actually have a schedule yet, but it'd be awesome to keep doing this. So, um, with that, I just wanted to kind of talk about what this is gonna be. So, uh, this isn't really a tutorial. That's why I didn't put it in the title. It's kind of just an in-depth breakdown kind of this animation you're seeing on screen right now. And if I remove the chat, you can see that a little bit better. And here I can also take this away. So, um, so it's more going to be my thought process, how I got to this final animation, and where I started as well, because that's something different. And also just kind of how I think about things and um, what thoughts you should have when approaching an animation like this. This is my first time doing a looping animation, so I learned a lot, and I thought I'd share it with you all. So that's what this is going to be about. Just there'll probably be some, tips and tricks here and there that you may pick up from me, and just how I think about things is mostly what this is. So with that, I'll get into showing where this came from, where this idea came from, and how it works. So you're seeing the final animation right now. I turned off the audio, which I also had some fun with doing the sound design. But the main thing is, of course, the animation. Seeing the final one right now that I'm like 90% proud of. There's probably some things I could change, but 99% proud of it. So I'll switch over to this view here, and I have it loaded up here. This is kind of the original thing that I made in 2016. It's a little overexposed now that I'm looking at it, but if I just hit play, it's not fancy. You may not even be able to see it. Not that. The portals are moving, so I just created the portals, and I do have this video up on YouTube called like portal breakdown or whatever, where I actually go into how I made the portals, and I'll be getting into some of that stuff again today. But I just wanted to say that I did not I did not start from blank. I mean, I made this from blank, or from nothing, from scratch. But in 2019, when I finished the last project, now that it's 2020, the most recent one, I started from this set. So some things are like 5 years old in my brain, and I can't I can't recall them. So if I'm missing some information, that's why. It's because I did this project a long time ago and I had to like re-get myself into it. So beyond this animation, if you could call it animation, really just the portals are animated and everything else is a still frame because that's how I achieved it. Beyond that, I actually made another version of the just right before I made the final version. So I'll just play that right now. I do have that one up on YouTube as well. This one, you can tell things are a little bit darker, and I didn't get the color correction right, but it basically has all the same elements as the last one. And this was kind of like directly inspired by the original that I was just showing you. I even started with the camera in the same position about right here. And then, I thought, oh, that would be cool if it goes through. And then someone saw it over my shoulder and they said, oh, it would be cool if it loops. And I went, oh, yeah, that's awesome. So I kind of kept adding on to this idea of an animated portal scene. So this one I thought was pretty cool. I did the sound design. I did I kind of basically, I kind of revamped the old project, kind of figured all the techniques out and did this one, and I was really happy with it, and I posted it on my Facebook page and Twitter and YouTube, everywhere, Instagram, and as soon as it was up, I started feeling like, okay, I could do better. Oh, there it looped again. Or it looped. This video has like 6 loops in it, I think, and then the video ends. So right after I posted it, I went, oh, I could do better than that. I don't really love the camera animation. It's a little jerky. There's not very many like cinematic shots. Like it's kind of cool, but it doesn't really work. And the camera animation, I just wasn't happy with it, and I thought that the positions of the portals was fine, but I felt like it could be way more dynamic. So I kind of said, oh, that's awesome, it's cool. I revamped it. My brain was already all in it, so I'll just turn that off, and here I just have the video of the final, which you've already been seeing, where it goes through the portal and goes around, and this was mostly me taking that other one and just going, how can I like maximize this and make it look as awesome as possible? And like I said, I'm like 99 percent proud, love this, proud of this. There's a lot I could have done because I revamped it from the old project, like I was saying. I just didn't do any texture work, basically, so all the textures are like from a way previous process that I don't really approve of, or I wouldn't do today because it's, older, 2016 version of me. Oh, look, there it goes, looping again. My naming convention, you like that. So I just kind of wanted to lay all that out, that I'm starting from oh, I hit the stop button. Well, anyway, I'm starting from this one where it was just basically still images with portals. So I figured out the portal effect basically in After Effects. That was kind of what this test was. That's where the portals are done. And then I just moved into doing this one very recently. And I was really happy with it until I like looked at it again with a critical eye, and I saw all the flaws, and so I wanted to make it more dynamic. And so if I just close this one, and here I can switch you back to what we were watching over here, which is just the final animation. And yeah, so this one is just way more dynamic, and so I'm going to be going into how I made the final version, not any of the other versions, but they all work very similarly. And if I don't know anything right off the top of my head, it's because I probably did it in 2016 and I'm having to jump in. So with that, I should probably get into everything. Ooh. So we hop over to Blender. This is my Blender scene. Right now it's rendering with the Eevee engine, but I intentionally set up a lot of things to make Eevee look pretty decent. It doesn't look great, but it looks pretty good. So I thought about just breaking down each element and kind of telling you how it's set up. So starting with the cube, which is kind of the main one of the main focuses. This is a pretty simple model. If I just tab into it, it's actually got a whole ton of modifiers on it. So I only modeled one corner of it, and then the mirror modifier mirrors it in like every single direction. Yeah, it does. And just bevel, subsurf, edge split. I don't even know why edge split's on here, because again, I did this in 2016 and I basically didn't touch it. So that's pretty simple. The centers, I don't know why they're separate, but they're kind of done the same way, where at least I made one and then I just copied it around and oriented it like that. And materials for these are pretty simple. It's just some glossy mixed with some diffuse and some a grunge texture, like 3 different grunge textures kind of mixed together that I had. And I did all that back in 2016, so I actually don't really know how it's all set up. I mean, I do know how it's, like, I could take a look at it and it's all there, but it's all here, but I don't know if I could tell you how all this works. Anyway, so that's the cube, basically. It's pretty basic. The room itself is mostly one mesh, but I did something interesting here, and I'll show you in wireframe view, actually. If I go to top view, if I turn on the grid floor, you can see that I actually modeled the room pretty much to scale. It looks like it's a little tiny bit off, and I have no idea why that is, but basically when I started with the room, I just, I created a plane or something like that, and then, used Blender units. So, as a base. So each quarter of a panel, basically, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go back to Eevee, you can clearly see it. Is, like these are 2 quarters wide. Is one Blender unit, and doing that at the very beginning makes my life just 10 times easier with doing most things, especially like lining up. What I eventually do is line up multiple copies of the room and getting the portals like centered on things. Just doing that made it so much easier to work in actual unit scale, so that each one of these squares is a unit. And it might be a little large. Like if I go into fly mode and then hit G for gravity, you can kind of walk around this scene like a first-person shooter, and that cube is massive. This cube is like as tall as me, but I don't think this is actually the right height for a person, or maybe it is. And this room it's not to scale. It's just one Blender unit is one quarter of one of these panels. So I did that. It makes things a lot easier, and I do recommend it. Maybe going about a different way. I couldn't really change it because I did it again. I set up all this in 2016, so I kind of left everything the way it was for doing this new animation. If I was to recreate it, I might do something different, but for now, or for this, it works. I just reading the chat. Hey guys, thanks for joining in. And I can pop you up on screen right here. There we go. Thanks for joining and figuring out one of your questions. What is this called? Well, I named it Portal Infinite Loop on YouTube. Portal 2 Infinite Loop, basically, because it's more inspired by the Portal 2 design, and all the textures and stuff came from Portal 2. Really, I took a lot of screenshots from the game I'll get into that a little bit, not too much though. Um, anyway, so moving on to the rest of the room. One thing I did have a lot of fun with was these lights. So these lights are, they're all instances of a collection that I made. So if I just turn off the room here, turn on the light collection, see, where is it? There it is, right here. And can you turn off the background? I don't know if you can. Oh, you can. Okay. So here we go. This is the front side. So I made this collection. I have a few objects. It's not very many objects. There's an area light. There's like a pane of glass, which is basically just a cube that has a glass material on it, and a light housing object, which is, if I turn off the other objects, is just a cube without a front face. And they all have, or this one has two materials, a light material and a black material, and the light material is actually an emissive material, which, if we were over in the shader editor, it's kind of complex, but not really. It's basically, the light material is just, that's the noise texture. Yeah, it's just separating the object coordinates out to X, Y, Z. It looks like I used the Y and the Z, and I mixed those together in order to get like a kind of a spot, and then I invert that so that it's darker on the edges. That just adds a little bit of texture to it, and then I multiply it into the strength of the emission, which has a bit of texture to it. So not very much. It's actually the glass that gives most of the dimension to this, which glass material is just a wave texture that's been rotated 45 degrees, because if it wasn't, it would look like that. And multiplied and add, just it's a glass shader with a displacement, so that's actually doing some like realistic displacement stuff. And then I added this area light to just tell the computer where light is coming from. Basically, I didn't mark it as a portal, so it is actually casting light, but it's there. It helps Eevee. It just kind of helps things, with noise and stuff in the final render, because I am using Cycles as the final renderer, or I was planning on it, and I did, because Eevee doesn't look that great, or I don't know how to use Eevee to its fullest extent. There's some crazy Eevee renders out there, and I don't know how that works, but I use Cycles, not Eevee. So something that made this process pretty easy with these lights, you can see that this light is 1x4 in the rectangle, because since I made everything to that unit scale, I just needed 4 units across and one unit high. That just made it really easy. Anyway, so all this is in its own little collection that can be disabled. And if we go back into the room, which is labeled room 3 for some reason, this looks different, because scene world, there we go. So each of these is just a collection instance right here, and I can just duplicate these around. And the way you get a collection instance is you can just right click on a collection that you have and say instance to scene, and then I'll make a new instance, and that instance is over here by my cursor. So it just makes this, it's basically just an empty with its object in the object panel. If you go to instancing, it just has a collection connected to it. So you could make it yourself, but I like the right click method. And then once you have that, you can just duplicate it around, and they're all the same. So if you change anything in one instance, or if I change anything in this like root group, then it'll update to all the lights. And that's what I like, because I don't like doing work multiple times. Anyway, so placing these lights in the walls. The wall I should actually talk about is, there's a hole right here. If I turned off the lights in this room, boom, like that, there's just holes. I divided the mesh. You can subdivide it with, oh, that was the wrong key. Control R, and just roll until you have 4, because again, the unit system made that really easy. And then just delete wherever you want. I could add a light in the middle of this panel Oh, also going into the room, I should talk about a few of the textures and like why it's all different. Um, those are just separate materials, and each material has its own texture. So I went in-game Portal 2 and I just kind of did some research about what happens when. And so when there's a portable floor or a floor you can put a portal on, it's in this 4 pattern, or all the floors like that. Same with the dark material, it's in the 4 pattern. And then but when it's on the walls, it's these 2x2s unless there's something in the middle of it, and then it cuts into that 4, and you can just take segments of the 4 out. And I think same with the walls, although I don't have any dark wall with lights in it. So I'll just turn the lights back on. And very similar to the lights as this observation room here. If I, how do I do this? Select those objects. Just use right shift bracket a few times and then solo that. There, that kind of worked. Okay, well, it hid the person, but this is very similar to the light. I just have an area light, which is casting the light in from the room. Open up the hierarchy. That's actually basically it. And then this is a composite object where one object is this like frame thing. And if I switch into mesh mode, maybe you can see that better, where I just put a crossbar across it because that's what the actual room has. And here, if I go full screen again, I should probably read things a little better. But that, and then if I just unhide this, it's just a plain. That was hiding again. Just a plain, and this has the glass material on it. So I have room and room glass. And the way I got all the room texture is I just went into perspective mode like this, or front view, and I just selected everything and then unwrapped it. And you can actually see that if I go into shading and just open up the, oh, that's one of the grunges. Observation room small? Yeah, right there. And you can see I have the Portal 2 cursor in the middle of the screen because I actually just captured this shot in game. And yeah, so if I was to edit mode, the UV's really simple. It's just U unwrap from project from view, I think, and then I scaled it to the right size just to get some of that. And my material is pretty simple, just that texture with kind of with the power and multiply node to get the brightest areas into an emission shader, just to show that there is a bit of light, and then that's mixed with an add shader. And then the area light that I had on there kind of closes it all off and adds extra lighting to the scene. So there's that, and then the person that's in there, I wanted an actual 3D person because if there was like just a 2-dimensional cutout, it wouldn't have been quite as cool. And in Eevee, they're a little bit more silhouetted. In Cycles, you can actually see some of the details. So I actually did have to put a little teeny tiny bit of effort into the person. Wow, Cycles is pretty, is a hog. Okay, there. So the person just looks like this. There's a rig, which I think I downloaded this person off Blend Swap and then did some adjusting myself. It was like female sculpture with rig or something. So props to the person who made that. I'm sorry I didn't do my research on that. I totally should have. But yeah, so props to them. They did a nice rig and they have a nice model, and I basically butchered it because I went in, added some vertex paint to make sort of a face because you could sort of see it. Just kind of randomly colored the pants yellow and the shirt white, and made the arms or orange, I guess, and made the arms, bare, because kind of sort of supposed to remind you of Chell. I've just had this model for a long time, and it didn't take too much effort to get it in, so I went with that. And maybe you can tell in the final animation that I didn't put much effort into it. There's no animation or anything on that. It's It's just there. Okay. Moving on, we have the portals. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to actually do something that I didn't do for the final render, and I'll explain how all this works. But basically, on the room object, which is all of this, everything but that, so all of this. There's I have a whole bunch of modifiers. Bevel modifier we don't need to worry about, but I have these two Boolean modifiers, and these Boolean modifiers are using these two objects which I have hidden currently. And those objects are, well, if I bring the blue one in here, it just looks like a box, and that's because I have it set to bounds here as in display. So if I set it to textured, you can see it's the shape of a portal, and it's basically just a ring of faces all the way around, a ring of faces, and then one face in the middle. That's all that shape is, and I set it to bounds because that makes it a lot easier for later. But this is basically the Boolean object for the room. So if I activate the Boolean here, boom, you can see there's a little hole in the wall, and this is, I think, difference. I played around with this a whole bunch. The orange one's the same difference using the orange portal object. And so this is how I went about the first render, I think. This one, where I did this, I actually had holes in the wall that the camera flies through, and these are the holes in the wall that I made. But I later found out that this is actually not really the best way to do it. So I kind of scrapped this idea. It's all here, but it kind of doesn't work the same way anymore. So I'll turn both the blue and the orange on for now, because it makes things easier in the future. But basically, these are just these objects with a point light, which I misspelled point on that one, but a point light to add some lighting to the scene. You can see this one has a little bit of blue glow that happens down here on the floor. And so really, out of all of this, I only kept the point light for the final thing. But I'm going to leave these portals because it kind of helps with aligning things and getting it all working. Hello! Welcome. So, I just bring up the chat to make sense of what I just said. Yeah, so that's basically the setup. Is there's the room. I do also have these mask modifiers, which I'll get into because they have animated values on them. But these Boolean modifiers just basically make it easier to see the portals, and with the way I built the scene, you can actually see that these portals are at like 5, 10, which if I was to move this, I could put it at 3 or 4, I guess, and like accurately put portals around on all the surfaces. I'm going to leave it where it is because it messes up things if I move it. But yeah, so that's basically the whole room setup. Now, I have everything in this room 3 collection. And this is because I'm doing the same thing I did with the lights here, where I was using collection instances, and I'm just doing that for everything. So here, let me activate all of the rooms, all 4. There's 4 of them, and you can kind of see what that does. So the original room is here. This one's the original, and these are just collection instances. So I can't edit anything in here. I can't click on just the cube. I can't do anything like that. It's all just one thing, and it moves all at once, all at the same time. So here, if I go into like room 4, I don't care about this one. I'll just delete it, and I kind of show you how this is done. So I can go to room 3, just kind of say instance to scene. It'll make a new room 3 collection thing, and I can name this room 4 if I wanted to. And then I'll just put that in its own collection, and these are all in their own collection because later I use the passes, or what are these called, view layers, to get everything working correctly. So they need to be in their own collections, and that's why I have them in this passes collection box. They don't really need to be there, but it helps. So put that in its own collection. Room 4, let me select it and not rename it, and just go to top view. And I'm actually going to reset it using Alt-G and Alt-R to clear rotation and location. So now it should be perfectly where room 3 is, or basically the base room. And then we kind of now you kind of have to think about, this is where you start thinking with portals and sort of figure out where you want this. So this room goes through this portal, which is the blue portal, and it goes from, so we want to look through the orange portal, because on the other side of the blue portal is the orange portal. So we want the orange portal, so this portal over here, to be on top of the blue portal. So that means we need to rotate 90 degrees in clockwise direction. So we need to rotate 90 this direction, and 90, I don't know if that was clockwise or not. I don't know if it matters. No, it does matter. Okay. I think that's right. So if this is the blue portal, no, this is the orange portal. Yeah. So we want the orange portal lining up with the blue portal. And I do have some helpers for keeping the portal straight. Like right now you can barely see a little glow coming from this point light. If I go into room 3 here and I activate this object, right? I think it's this object. Oh yeah, I gotta activate the blue one. It's just a ring of faces that have a color on them. So now you can see orange and blue. So that makes it a lot easier when you're at a distance and you're like, oh look, blue one, orange one, there. So we want the orange portal to line up with this blue portal, and then we want this blue portal to line up with this orange portal. So since these rooms were built using the grid system, as you can see, the grid is here, and they're like all perfectly aligned, almost perfectly aligned. Basically, I think these are 20 or 40 units across. I'm not sure, maybe it's 20. All I know is that wherever you place this one is at minus 20 or minus 20. No, what is happening? Minus 20. There. So now these two sandwich each other perfectly. And then for the rest of it, I mean, you could do the math, but I'm just gonna come in here and slide it using there. GY, and just kind of line these two portals up like that. So now we have, and you know, you just do that all the way around, and now you have all 4 rooms. And if I was to go into fly mode again, maybe hit gravity, turn gravity off, now I can actually fly through the portal like it's a loop. But it's actually not, it's just it's a false loop, you know, because I'm actually, there is actual extra geometry, and it probably takes extra rendering time as well to do all this. So, from there, hold on, close my notes, that's not good. From there, something else that's really important, or I found to be really important, especially with circular rooms like this, like these portals are actually in pretty easy places. They're both at the same level at ground floor, and they just go around in a for loop. But there probably could be way more crazier rooms and things designed. I went really simple for this because it gets really complex in your head if you keep it all in your head, and you're not being really simple. So for something I found to be really helpful is if you just instance room 3 again, instance to scene. And this room 3 is just kind of like scrap. I don't know. It doesn't really... We're going to delete it pretty soon here. But if I just select all the instances, so leave room 3, or leave scrap. Actually, we need to clear it so it's right where room 1 was. Wait, that was room 4. Scrap. Alt-G, Alt-R. Okay. So now it's exactly where room 3 is, which is actually at the origin of the world. I could have put it in the center there, but it made more sense to put it at the origin. So if we take all the rooms, I think you can do that. Yeah, you take all the room instances and just Shift S, cursor to, or cursor just selected. So if I put the cursor over here somewhere, Shift S, oh, I gotta select them all again. What? Shift S, cursor to selected. It'll put it right there, right in the middle between them all. And I just like to create an empty and put it right there and just call it center. So I already have that empty here. You may have seen it floating there. It's just a little empty in the middle. We could give it a cool design if we want, like cone. No, maybe a sphere. We just grow it a little bit. Oh, that's a lot of it. Not a little bit. Okay. Like that, just so we have this center point always marked, and we can delete scrap, because really the only reason is to get a true accurate center point. Just like that. So we have a center empty, and this will just come in handy for just a lot of things, because there's a few things we're gonna have to be instancing around the circle, beyond what's in the room. So basically the philosophy, or the idea, is anything that's in the room, so cubes, characters, props, anything, set design, lights, those need to go in this room, in the base room, like collection. And one of these rooms, the base room doesn't have to be one of these rooms. Like the light, I could deactivate this room 3, and all the others are still there because they're just instancing that room. And I guess I have an extra cube. Oh, cool. I have a backup scene which has like things in it, I guess. There's an extra cube floating there. So yeah, you don't need to have it activated. So room 3 doesn't actually have to be part of this thing. You could actually make instances for all 4 rooms and put the center point actually at the center of the world. That might be better than what I did. But for me, I did room 3 is actually one of the rooms, and that actually kind of messed up my workflow a little bit. I'm liking this idea of not doing what I did. So yeah, so let's move onto the camera animation, which might look a little frightening when I turn it on, but here we go. Hey, look, that looks not frightening. So we've got a camera. If I zoom in here, the camera, like that, it's here. I have it going back to top view, maybe even going into this view, or wireframe. I have it on this animation, or on this path. So the way you can make that, this is a point path, or just a path. So the way you can make that is by just going to curve, or Shift A, curve, path. And that'll create at my center object here, that'll create just a path that is getting, that's weird because I think it instances it into room 3 here. And so it's getting duplicated everywhere. But basically this is just allows you to put points, and I found this really easy to animate cameras with. You could do a NURBS or a Bezier curve, if that's how you pronounce it. But there's just a lot more points. It's a lot more controllable, but there's just a lot more points to worry about. And when you're thinking about getting everything to line up perfectly, having less points is better. So, sorry, reading the chat. I can't do 3 things at once. But yeah, hello everyone new who's watching, not else. Welcome. I'm describing how to do the camera, which, deep topic. Anyway, so you can create a path, and take your camera and just take the camera, select the path, and then Control P for parent. Although it says Shift left. Why does it say Shift left? I don't know. Control P, and then you can say follow path right here, and that will set up a animation, a path animation right here, where you can set the number of frames that you want your animation to go for, and basically this evaluation time tells the computer where the camera is along the path, and it doesn't have to be a camera, it could be any object. So I want it to be at 0, which I think it will just default to 0 since I have it animated. Anyway, so this path is, if I turn off cyclic, actually I'll leave that on. So this path, I just kind of put the path where I want, and this is sort of trial and error. If I run through the animation, this path is controlling the camera's location. Here, let me switch to animation view so you can see this a little better where I have the curves. So the path itself is just a straight line here on the animation curves. It just starts, and then as the camera goes, it ends. It just goes from one end, which since it's a loop, it goes back to its start. It just goes from one end to the other, and I guess the camera does a weird flip when it reaches the end. I don't know why it does that. So it's just handling the camera's location. So basically, I just went around, I kind of selected keyframes and then placed the camera location where I wanted. And it took a little bit of trial and error, but yeah, it's basically how it works. All the rotation, so camera, panning up to the window there, holding on this cube and rotating around while it's position, while the position stays solid. Or even, like this one where it rotates back to a new cube, that is all on the camera itself. And you can kind of see that here. You don't understand animation paths, that's a tough luck kind of, but they're really useful. This is just the graph editor, which you can find right here. So you can view animation in separate channels. So basically I have the X and the Z channel of the rotation on the camera animated, and those are illustrated with these lines right here. So this is the X and this is the Z. And so basically I just went through and added keyframes at each specific point where I wanted, and then fine-tuned it with the little curve handles here where you can kind of rotate around. So I did it this way with the path and the rotation of the camera animated because it made it really easy to loop. So on the path, I have it marked as cyclic down here. And if I turn that off, you can see it breaks right here. And so that would be basically the camera just starts and then it goes all the way and it goes to where that point, and it messes everything up if I do that. So I set the path to cyclic, and basically how I made the path, because this is actually 2 loops. I should explain that. So the camera goes through the portal, goes around, comes here, and then it actually resets right here. So this is almost the same as the first frame here. This frame right here. So any other animation is another loop, is actually a duplicate. I don't actually need all of this. It's just to make sure that it loops perfectly. So basically what I did is I did one animation all the way to here. And then I looked at where my points were and I just took them, made sure I had the center point selected and Shift S cursor to selected so that the cursor's on the center point. That's why the center point's useful, took all the points, duplicated them, rotated them around the center. So I'm just using period and I'm selecting the 3D cursor as the origin. And then you can rotate that around 180 degrees because that's, if it was just one room, it would be 90. But for this, it's 180 all the way around. And you see that lines up perfectly with what I actually have there. And then you can just, I'm just going to delete that, but you can just select these 2 points which wouldn't have a face between them, just hit F, do a face, and then select these two, hit F, join a face, and if it's the last 2 points, it'll just automatically make it cyclic. So that's how I made the looping path. And then for the looping rotation of the camera, because that's a different thing, I just had to make sure that all my points lined up. So on the X channel here, this beginning point, this one right here, I just copied it and put it right here. So these 2 points are actually identical. I'm not hitting them perfectly with my mouse, but they are identical on the X channel. And then same with the Z, except for the Z was a little bit more complicated because you have to add 180 degrees because it's rotated around. It's not the same rotation because Z is controlling the well, if I RZ, it controls, oh, not, there we go. Rotation on Z, it controls the panning basically of the camera. So when you get around to this side over here where it has to loop, it's actually 180 degrees off. If it was if I just copied and pasted the frame, it would be facing the wrong direction. So I just copied and pasted that frame and then went into the Z channel here and just did plus 180, and you can do that in Blender. It's really nice. You can just add that. So let's see. Yeah, okay, so looping these, there's a really handy thing called modifiers in the graph editor down here. You just open up this side panel and navigate to modifiers, and then you can say add modifier, and I use cycles, which is not the renderer, but this actually cycles, like it's cyclic, looping, all that sort of stuff. So basically what you can do is you can take a certain channel, so these work on a channel at a time, so the X actually has a different channel, the Y has a different channel. This modifier only works on one channel. If I change this one there, it doesn't affect the Z because the Z would go away if I did it that way. Anyway, so you take one channel, put on cyclic, and then say, so if I had no cycles, the path would look like that, where it's just kind of flat. You know, it takes this keyframe and just interpolates it. The camera will stay this way forever. If I say repeat motion, it'll go back to the start frame and just do the exact same thing again. So that's really helpful for looping, except for in my case, I want the camera to be 180, you see it pops because I need it to be actually 180 degrees offset. And so everything's off if I just do it repeat motion. So then there's repeat mirrored, which will kind of like reverse the camera animation, and that's kind of interesting if you want to like go forward and then reverse again. But for my purposes, I want repeat with offset. So we'll basically take the ending point of the loop and make that the starting point of this loop, and then just go up from there. So take all this information and go up from there. And there's a lot of other settings in here that you can control, like how many cycles it does. If you set it to 0, it just goes infinite. It would just keep going like that. I set it to 1 cycle so that it just stops, because the path animation doesn't go any further than that, so the loop doesn't really need to either. I feel like I'm not explaining this super well. It's kind of sort of complicated, but basically you just add the cycle modifier to both these rotations and it loops. Or hopefully it loops, and if it doesn't, that's a difficult problem. But that's how I did it. The next piece is the focus empty, which just kind of, if we go into camera view here and just turn this on, see it's like focused on the cube, then it focuses on the portal, then it focuses on the other cube, and then it goes and focuses on the window. And the camera doesn't have like a really shallow depth of field, but it does matter to like just keep it in focus if it has any depth of field at all, which I think it does. So so this focus object was pretty important to me to get working. and I actually encountered some problems with it. So, um, so basically what I did is I just marked all the points I wanted on the first loop. So this single loop, I think it loops about right here. This is the starting point of the loop, and the ending point is basically the same. And but then I couldn't just use the cycle modifier like I did for the camera, because since I'm animating the location on this empty, it actually it's just a lot different. Like the Z channel maybe can be cycled, but even that might be different. No, the Z channel I think is the same, but the X location needs to be like mirror flipped. You can see where it kind of like dips down. If I kind of exaggerate that one a little bit, kind of like dips down up here, but then it goes up and it dips up there. So it kind of needs to be like mirrored, and the Y location kind of goes all over the place. I don't even know how to describe what that is doing. Or it kind of like, oh, here you can see it like steps up, like dun dun dun, and then it goes da 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 down right there. So it's kind of like all backwards and reversed, and I couldn't figure out any of these modifiers that did that. So basically what I did is I did the animation once, so that's one loop right here, and then took all those keyframes, copied and pasted them, and then used the center point. So if I go back to the 3D cursor, you can just take these points and that's no, I went to the next keyframe. There we go. So basically, if I was to just copy and paste this, it would be 180 degrees over here, and I just took it and rotated it 180 degrees and then re-keyframed it for every single keyframe I made. So I had to be pretty strategic about the keyframes, because the more you have, the more work it is changing that focus. But at the same time, the focus doesn't really matter if it loops perfectly or not, because it's a little easier to fake the focus. So, so that doesn't matter too much, but I did have to do a little bit of manual work on the focus, is my main point. That's about everything, camera animation wise, besides just making it cool. And a lot of that was like, where did I put the portals? And, the idea of it backing through the portal right here, that was the cool one that I came up with. And a lot of that just stemmed from, like I said, if I played the earlier animation that I made, from this one, just I kind of animated the camera in a very similar way, but it just wasn't cool, and I think that was based on portal placement and just the ideas I was putting into it. So that's kind of the artistic side of all of this, is kind of getting the camera, making that interesting. And that's kind of what I struggled with. That's why I made this secondary version of it. The last thing before we move on from this, and kind of move away from Blender and move into After Effects, where all the like actual portal rings happen, is actually, I think there's two things. The first is, so I was saying that these like holes in the walls, these are basically just for me in Blender. They don't actually, I didn't actually render it like this. What I rendered was, if I turn these off, and also these like little color helpers right here. There we go. Actually, don't even need these either. These little boxes around the portals, just the light. What I did is, on the room object, I actually have these masks. So these are Boolean objects. What I had are Boolean modifiers that cut that hole. So I just turn those off. I keep them here, but I turn them off. And I actually have these masks. So these masks basically cut a hole. If I turn off all the other rooms, this is making it confusing. Basically just cut a square hole where the portal is, on the wall that the portal is. And so I've got one for each side. There's one over here, boom, boom. I can turn those on and off at will. So I have those animated, and actually down here you can see where they're animated, the on-off switch. So, so when the camera starts animating, it actually just runs into the wall, and that's because I wanted to do the mask later in After Effects, so I wanted to have as much information there as possible. But also, when the camera flips around, we need to see into this room. So I have, if I turn on or pop out of camera view, when the camera, right as the camera passes through it, right here, the camera goes whoosh, flies through, and then that goes boop and pops open, so that when the camera flips around, we can actually see through this hole into this room, so that when I add all the layers together in After Effects, we actually have renders of this room. And same with this side of it, where when the camera goes through, I want that to be a hole that I make in After Effects, not in Blender. So I want that whole wall right there. So we have to keep this door basically open, but there's a bunch of keyframes here alternating when they open and when they close based on what the camera sees. So depending on how your portals are set up, I managed to do it this way, but you might have to get a little fancier than this, depending on your portals, because my first scene, this one, doing this with this like infinite portal kind of look, that one I had a lot more complicated setup. But for this one is actually a lot simpler the way I animated the camera. So basically, animate the camera first, and then kind of figure this out. Because another thing you need to figure out is where your loop point is. So if I turn on my portal helpers here, you can actually see my loop points. I have my little timeline. This highlighted area is what I actually rendered. So I have all of this animation starting here, going into here, that like I'm not using. I just kind of deleted it. I mean, it's not deleted, it's just not here. So, or I didn't render it. So, basically, your loop point needs to be where you can't see. It's like, I don't know, this took me a while to get my brain into, but it kind of makes more sense when we jump into After Effects and see what I actually rendered. So maybe I should do that, but your loop point here, let me just open up After Effects with the actual renders in it. If I go to room 1 here, is this the right one or the wrong one? Okay, no, this is right. So my loop point is actually, is this right? I think so. Do this. Here we go. So, my loop point is actually right here, where it kind of goes from transparent, and if I turn that on, I don't think I can, but it goes from transparent, which is this black color, or this is transparent, to having the edges of the portal. And this portal was made in After Effects. Here I just took a mask and cut this hole out. So it goes from transparent and then flies around, and then there's a hole there, don't mind that, on top of the cube, and then it goes back to transparent. And that's really important because there is a little bit extra at the end here, because you do see through these portals, or at least this one right here. But it's really hard explaining loop points, because basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this transparency and can sort of actually show you, and put the other room behind it. So I have another render of a different room, which goes from transparent again. Goes from transparent to right here. Where you see through this portal. So it's actually black until you see through that portal, and then you go in through there, look up the room, and then it goes out here back to basically transparent, or basically so you can't see through the portal anymore. So basically you take that layer that we just watched and you put the other layer on top of it right here, so that there's the portal edges right here on top. And so loop points are kind of like, it's kind of like where the footage revisits itself, because technically in Blender I could turn on every single room. So if I, right now I only have one room, but I could turn on every single room and this would be a continuous loop. I could just keep rendering this and I could render for like 5 years. I could render all of this and it goes back to the start and it could loop. Now there might be some inconsistencies that I don't know about, and that's why I'm creating this like transparency border, because if that wasn't there, if I rendered this all in one image, there would be a lot of like, if there's any mistake anywhere, I couldn't really fix it, because like there's no place I could just cut and like fix a mistake while we're not looking through any portal, and then cut to a new like piece of footage or something like that. So the loop point thing is just for like final rendering purposes. I don't know, I'm not really making very much sense, I think, but it took me a while to get my head wrapped around it. Like a while as in like an entire day or more, just kind of sitting here thinking about where to loop and when, and a lot of it was trial and error. I kind of failed with this earlier version. I failed like 5 times before I got this one working, and so it actually took me a lot more time to get this one finished than it did this new one. So yeah, I don't think I'm explaining that very well, but that's basically what I'm thinking about a lot. So before we really move over to After Effects, there's one more thing that kind of needs to be done, which is getting the 3D data out of Blender and into After Effects in order to get everything to line up right. So for that, I'm actually using there's a add-on for exporting to After Effects. That's really nice. So basically what I have is this tracking collection, which just has an empty placed at the center of every portal. So basically what I did is I just selected the point light here, put the cursor on it, created an empty, named that one portal 1, and then duplicated that using the center empty and just rotated it around until it hit all the portals, because you actually can't select the point light of all these portals since they're in collections. So that just made these portals, and then you can select all those, plus the camera and the animation track and the focus if you want. And just copy that, Control-C, copy. And the add-on that I was just mentioning, you could try and say export to After Effects, but the add-on, as far as I know, hasn't been ported to Blender 2.81, which is what I'm using right now for all this. So I actually had to use Blender 2.79. So you just copy all of those and then open up an empty scene of Blender 2.79. This one's actually not empty. I should delete it. So this is the older version of Blender that I know has this add-on. And then you can just paste all of this in and it should work. Oh, look, I got my center object as well. So the camera should still animate. You do need to line up your timeline. So in my Blender here, I have my timeline is from basically 1300 or 1302 to 1768. So I need 1302 to 1768. That's not, I wasn't typing. 1768. There we go. If I zoom out all the way to there and I select my path and my camera, you can see all my animation is here. So it should be virtually the same, just like it doesn't have anything in it. And I guess the focus is all wrong. on the camera here. Camera focus object should be the anim focus. Okay. Naming is very important. Anyway, so basically now I just have I have it all in a different version of Blender. It should all line up perfectly. And really the only objects I need are the camera and these portal centers, these portals. So I don't even need the focus or this center object, just these 5. So you can select those and then say File, Export to Adobe After Effects. When you do this, it'll ask you some things down here like which cameras, why, how, when, what name, where. So you just kind of fill that out and save it as a file, and that just turns into, if I go into my render file, to this JSX file, which you can open in After Effects just by saying import, not import, scripts, run script file, and there it is. You can just select it and say open it, and it'll actually create a new composition with your camera, all your portals, and I guess the focus object. I'm not sure why that's there. Maybe I messed up somewhere. Because I have 2 of these. Sweet. Okay. Anyway, hopefully that all kind of made sense. I ran through it pretty quickly, but you can, if you have the portal centers, that'll just make your life easier in After Effects for lining up the 3D, the objects in 3D space. It just made it so much easier. Last thing in Blender maybe is compositing. I put a little denoise on it and also tried to render out a depth pass, but I didn't end up using that, so none of that really matters. Exporting, what I did for the export out of Blender was just saved everything in a file structure. So basically all I have is this renders folder, which has each version of the animation I worked on. So 05 is the newest one, 05, and then I made a new folder for each like pass I did. So I have 2 rooms passes, and this will vary depending on what you see through which portal, because for 04 I think I had all 4 rooms. You can see back room, left room, right room, main room. Didn't do great on naming that. So this one I just have room 1, room 2, and their depth passes, which I didn't end up using, and then a cube mat, which I'll get into why I have that later. So basically you can just create a new folder here, just call it like, my room, and then you can put a file name here with an underscore at the end, and then Blender will add all the frame numbers. So like here you see room 2, room underscore 2 underscore all of the frame numbers. So you just go into my room, and this will just be room underscore, let's say, accept. And then I just render out as PNGs, make sure and have an alpha channel. Like I was saying, the alpha is important, or the transparency is important. I did color depth at 16, doesn't really matter. All this doesn't really matter. And then you hit render and wait for a long time. Well, hitting render is harder now, but you can go up here and say render animation. So this is turning a little bit more into a tutorial, but it's not really supposed to be. It's more of an in-depth breakdown. I just kind of wanted to show you what files I did and the passes I had. It's just the combined and the Z pass, but I didn't even use the Z pass, so just the RGB and transparency in a PNG frame sequence. So I have every single frame of all the passes, and then in After Effects you can just click and drag those in, and they turn into this, which is just like, it's a frame sequence, and you can watch it like a movie. It's really nice. I guess I'm missing some frames on that. Oh, this is the depth map. So the cube mat. Oh yeah, so that's right. So you may have seen right here where the cube actually passes in front of the portal. And since I was making the holes in the portal, or the actual mask holes, if I turn on this, that's actually transparent. It's not black, it's transparent. So I was actually making those holes in After Effects here. So a quick look at that is I just imported the camera and all the portal things, or all the locations, and this is what they look like in After Effects. These little red square things laying on their sides, and you can just take masks. So it looks like I have one right here. Actually, let's go over to this one. You can see it more clearly. I can just take a object. If I turn off the mask, there, it's just a black solid, square solid, and I put a mask on it, and then in 3D space. So I made it a 3D layer, and I said the position of this 3D layer is, let's select the right portal. So I guess it's portal 1. The name, I named these all funny, so whatever. So you just copy the position of that and then copy it to the rotation, or to the position of that. Looks like it's a little off. Huh, interesting. And then your mask setting, you just, grab an oval and kind of make it about the right size, and add feathering and stuff. And that's all just kind of like compositing, trial and error. Not really going to get into that very much. And so they should, I put these on top as a silhouette alpha layer. So anything underneath them, which right now what I have underneath them, if I hide all those empties in the camera maybe, is just a layer, this room 1 RGB. So it's just the room image. So these two portals are just cutting out anything underneath them, which is the room. But the cube is on top. So is on top of this portal. So I needed just another pass, which I called cube pass, which I just basically rendered out the cube by itself. And the cube pass looks like this. It just looks like this, but this isn't actually the correct lighting, since I hid everything except for the cube, and I only rendered this much because that's all I need right when it just passes in front. So I actually took that and made that a mask, this alpha channel a mask for the actual cube render, which the lighting is just subtly different, but that just makes it better. So I took the actual render, the RGB, the room 1 RGB, and I just masked it with the cube. And I have a camera in this scene, but I don't actually need it for that. So that put together. Now, I put all that together. Let's see. Wow, there is a hole right there. Why is there a hole? Oh yeah, so you can just take this cube layer, put it in, and I marked the position, or just line it up like that, and voila, you have the cube in front of the portal. It's pretty simple. So next, in After Effects, you actually need to let's actually set up the loop. So because what you get from Blender is just is like rendered sequences of frames, and this one happens to end with the room kind of coming back into view, and I do use this little area of this, so that's why I rendered it. But most of this is black, and really all I needed this, and then I have a second layer which is just the other room as we fly through and pop out like that, and they're the exact same distance, or the exact same frame number length. This one's really black for a long time. So actually making the loop is a bit harder, because I'm starting the loop here, which is in one of the renders is complete transparency, it's just black, and then in another render it's also black. So I'm actually taking the end of one render and putting it at the beginning of the other, underneath the transparency, so that it loops like this. You can see through there, and you can actually see through this portal over here a little bit, and that's what this layer is doing, just kind of filling that little gap in. So the loop actually, the end of the loop is actually here. And it starts here too. But if you remember in Blender, the loop was actually, I mean, the loop was here, but it was kind of like, but where my camera actually was looped was about right here. Like, this is where I actually placed the camera to start the animation. So with loops, you can kind of move them around however you want because they infinitely loop. So you can put the loop point anywhere. So the loop point is actually right here in the final animation. It might not actually be right there because I moved it around again from this, but kind of the easiest loop point is right here. So basically what I have is I have these two compositions which just go through the entire animation. Goes all the way to the end. And then I bring them both into another comp, and I just chop it where the loop point is because they actually overlap the loop point a little bit. And then I take that chopped end, which is what these two layers are. Take that little chopped end. So these line up perfectly like that. Oh yeah, there you can see that where the start of these is actually lines up perfectly with the start there. And then I just took that chop and I put it at the beginning and underneath the rooms. Gotta line that up perfectly. And that way it just infinitely loops because it actually takes the ending of what we just saw and puts it at the beginning of what we're seeing now so that it's actually the same footage. It's not another render of a separate instance of a room. There's only 2 instances of the room, but yet we see all 4 rooms kind of. So in Blender, I don't need all 4 of these rooms. I actually only use room 1 and 2, which is why I only have room 1 and 2 in my what are these called? View layers, I think. So you can actually turn off 3 and 4, which 3 is our main the room that we modeled, but the way it ended up with my animation and choosing my loop points, it ended up being just room 1 and 2. So I actually only need these 2 rooms in order to complete the entire loop because that is 1/2 of the loop, I guess. So so yeah, you just chop off the ends and put them at the beginning because there's that little bit of overlap, and that's what sells the loop. So moving into portals, how the portals are created, this is kind of where my knowledge gets a little stingy because I made this back in 2016, so I don't actually know. I wonder how long I've been going actually. I don't know. Anyway, maybe someone will say, but well, since 1, so an hour. I was hoping to keep these kind of short, but I'm getting into a lot of detail. Anyway, so if I just go all the way to the very base layer here of the portal, this is what it looks like. It's just, I think this is just a really wide composition, long and wide. And, well, it might even be like really distorted and warped with all the effects, but basically it's just fractal noise that's been that has yeah, it looks like there's an adjustment layer with all these twirls on it to get that little bit of that little swoosh, little swirlies in there. Um and it's just running through their animations. Yeah, the evolution is just animated with time, I think. So if I open this up, yeah, it just says time times 100, and there's also I guess some offset turbulence to make it like move side to side or something. I don't know. Each layer has its own little twist to it, but basically they're all the same with just some fractal noise doing that. And then I do have this transform. This offset's turned off. Why? I'm not sure exactly, but I do have this transform for some reason to like put it up at the top. I'm not sure why I did that. Again, 2016. I don't really remember all of how I set all this up. But going from that I called that layer start. So then it goes into this layer where I put 4 of them all together. So there's one on like each half to kind of get rid of any seams. I did a little seamless thing, and I can't remember how that works exactly. I think it's this. There's like a mask in the middle that makes it seamless somehow, and I watched a tutorial for how to do that. It's offset with a mask and some feathering. I really don't remember, but you can make it seamless by doing that. So basically, with these starts, so these are just doing that. They're just kind of like the edges. And then I have another fractal noise layer just kind of filling the middle with some cool noise going crazy. And then I have this like solid beam to put on top of all that to make it kind of bright. And there is also somewhere in here there's like a turbulent, oh yeah, there's a small twirl on the Edgefire layer fractal noise. I'm not really explaining this very well, but basically I have some particle systems which are just adding those little dots and these little streaks, and they're just kind of flying everywhere. Like, I think I just literally pretty easy made a producer that's really long and not very tall and just kind of flings particles everywhere. So there's that, and that all goes into this comp, which kind of is a square comp, so that I can move this around, because this is the actual one that goes on top of the footage. And basically what that is if I turn off the glow and the mask and the particles in the background, maybe leave the background. This is just that previous layer, this straight layer, with this cool effect called polar coordinates. So you see, it's just a straight layer, and I scaled it to make it oblong. So if I make it, so that says 50, if I just make this 100, that's 10, not 100. There, 100. These look exactly the same. This is a square layer like that, and this is also the same thing. So there's not much different here, except for this polar coordinates, which if I turn it on, and actually I can turn it down too, this is a cool effect. Basically what it does is it takes a square thing and it makes it a round thing. So it's just kind of like, and then ta-da, you have a ring. And it just kind of, particles are flying everywhere. It kind of doesn't really make any sense which direction they're going. And yeah, so it's more like chaos, but it makes the ring, and then the scale at 50 just makes it into an oval, which is what a portal is basically. So pretty simple. It's mostly a lot of tweaking to get it till it looks right, and I did a lot of that, where it's like, where's the white core, where does that go, where does this go, what looks the best. And really it's not much, not much I can say. I wondered if that would get rid of this seam up here, but there is a way to do that. I'm not sure how. Anyway, I may have messed all this up, but so yeah, after you polarize it, circularize it, I just have some more particles, which are using gravity, and they're sort of 3D-ish particles, which have like a grid floor and everything. This took me a little while. I'll ignore that. This took me a little while to figure out how to get these particles to work. Oh, thank you. My phone's making noise too. But basically, they're just particles. They're just more particles. You can't go wrong with more particles. I mean, you can, but not likely. And then I just have a mask on that, which just takes those particles away from the center, so that they appear out of nowhere instead of they all appear out of the middle. They just kind of appear out of nowhere, which makes the portal a little bit easier to see through. So there is still particles in the middle, but not as many. And then I added a glow, which there's actually, looks like there's 2 glows I'm actually using, and a little bit of turbulent displace to kind of make the portal a little warpy. And that just adds that nice glow fall off. I think, yeah, so 1 glow is like this layer, and then the last glow is that. I did have a smaller glow, but that made it like too bright, I thought, so I made it a lot dimmer and just did that. So you get this nice glow fall off. So basically, what you do is back here where we have our loop animation, you can just take that portal layer, and open up your copy your camera and all your portals in to your simple explanation layer. Or I called it simple explanation because this is a lot simpler than my final comp. I'm kind of trying to walk you guys through how it gets crazy, basically. I'm not being able to reorganize all this. Anyway, so you have all your camera and all your empties. So you go through your animation. Let's say we want this portal to be the one that we set up. So we find the right empty. I gotta activate that so it looks like it's portal 1. Open up position using P, the key P on my keyboard. And then we just go to portal, make it a 3D layer so that it's affected by the camera. Hit P on that one, and then paste the position. And then it looks like the rotation is off by 90 degrees, 90. So we just type 90 in, and voila, there it is. It's right, it's on top of everything, and it looks terrible. But it looks like it's in 3D space in the right spot. So I think then you just scale it down till you have the right size. So 25 maybe? You can also switch it to screen, which will get rid of all the black. There we go. That'll make it a lot easier to see. So you can just kind of scale till that matches. So it's the size you want. There you go. Now you have a portal on your footage, and it should, if I play this right, yes, it's on top of the cube, so we could put it under the cube there, so that it gets masked. But yeah, it's stuck to your footage and in the right place. And that's why we exported all those empties, because that made it so much easier. I'll just hide those for now. And the last element of this, we come up closer to this portal. There we go. Is the color. And for that, I just love this plugin called Color Vibrance by Video Copilot, and it's free, it's amazing, and you just drag and drop it onto white things with white images with fall off, so it kind of has to have this glow kind of built in already. And right here you just pick the color. So let's say we want this to be my blue portal, maybe a little darker blue. I don't know, you can change, you can mess with the vibrance, how much it preserves the luminance, how bright it is, the gamma of it, which is also kind of how bright it is. I haven't fully understood gamma and brightness, but yeah, so basically you just add that on there. I think I also added a hue and saturation node and just bumped up the saturation a little bit to get more out of it. If we turn the vibrance down to 1 again and push the saturation up, this isn't looking totally right, but maybe I chose the wrong color of blue. I don't know. Anyway, you can play around with it. If it needs to be more saturated, just add saturation, and you're good. So that's basically how I did every single portal, and as you can see, this portal kind of goes on top of, or goes underneath the cube, but goes on top of this footage, So if you were to do the orange portal, you would put it under this footage because the orange is actually through that portal. Um, Same with all the other portals. Once you go through a portal, you kind of have to like figure out where your portal is. Um, oh yeah, because that's right. This is the same blue portal as this one right over here. This one hiding. If I can find a frame that has it, this one right here. So you kind of just have to duplicate your portal and find an empty that puts it on that position and all that. And that's basically the whole setup. Here, I'll show you the final composition, and I color coded it and everything. It gets a lot crazier, especially since there's hidden things, but I think that's just the camera, all the points. I just hid those. So we have the camera. We've got a room with some color correction on it. Don't know which room this is. Actually, I think room 2 here is the one that we're looking at. No, this one. This is the one we're looking at. So I just took it from the flat profile that I rendered out at and bumped it up with some levels, and then there's a blue portal underneath. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. There's a blue portal, an orange portal, a blue portal, and I strategically placed all these layers in between other layers so that they're all on top of the ones that they need to be. Like this orange portal here can be on top of the cube mask because it's actually floating over here somewhere. Wherever that orange portal is, I don't know. Yeah, there's the orange portal. It's on this side of us, and it's trying to render at full quality. That's kind of why I broke it out. So this orange portal can be anywhere at once, really, because it's on top of everything for a little while, but then at the end you need like a secondary orange portal to, I think that's what this short layer is. You need that one because it's actually behind things. It gets really confusing, or I guess it is on top of things, and then there's a blue portal underneath. It gets really confusing really quickly, so this took me a while to get my brain around it, and the color coding just helps everything. And yeah, so I did want to show this is what it would look like if it was just the portals. If I get this centered on my view, there we go. Pretty good. Oh, that's the wrong. There we go. You can see that with all of the layers correctly placed, you can kind of like see the orange portal through the blue portal. And I did that intentionally where I kind of stacked them all so that, because they are connected, and so you don't want to just have one blue portal and one orange portal. You actually want all the portals. But yeah, you can see that this portal kind of shows up for a little bit, but then gets masked by that portal wall, and then the cube's masking that one. I don't know, I thought this was just a really cool render. Although there is some funky things going around on the edges. I think that's the one thing I would change if I was to revisit this. Yeah, there's that. And then I did add one extra layer, which I'm calling distortion, which is like a little bit of heat distortion or some sort of like warbly bit when you're looking through a portal. So basically I did it the same as the portals. They're 3 layers, and they just have some turbulent displace on them where like in a mask around the portal. So I rendered this out so you could kind of see it. It might be too subtle to actually see, but basically there's just a little bit of hint of warble. Like, see the edge of the cube right here? You watch that. It, when you pass through the portal, it gets like it starts wiggling. Like, this line is not a straight line anymore. I don't know if you can really see it, and there's some of it bleeding over onto the edge of the portals here too. I think this effect is like really subtle and you almost don't notice it. Yeah, you can kind of see it there if you look at the straight lines on this gray, the dark gray. You can kind of see that they're not really straight and they're kind of moving around and warping. And that just adds to the, like, you're looking through a glass, some sort of looking glass, and then when you fly through, I get rid of that distortion, and it just, and then you're like in the the present, you pass through the portal or whatever. It's a really subtle effect, and I could ramp it up to 100 if I really wanted to, but I spent a good time figuring out how to do that. And it is a little bit more complicated. I think what I did is I duplicated the portal masks, and I like made them so that's like the transition through the portal where it kind of like closes it around you. And these are like distortion masks. So this, I'm gonna put distortion where this white blob is, and then you see the next one, and it does the same thing where it kind of like opens up around you, and there is a little extra distortion through that secondary portal. I just close all these. Yeah, and then the distortion layer itself is a adjustment layer. So I have this checked. So if I turn that off, you can see that I added just some turbulent displays to that. And if you turn it into an adjustment layer, what that's doing is it's distorting anything below it, any layers. So if I was to turn on the room and the other room and turn off this layer, this distortion layer, you can kind of see that, yeah, it's adding a lot of distortion to the edges and anything that's through there, including the actual blue portal glow itself, which doesn't seem to be lined up correctly. Interesting. That might be a problem that I will never address because I'm just, at this point, I'm kind of done with this project. It was really fun. It was really cool. But I'm just kind of done. So all of that stacked up on top, you get the final. There is one last touch I did to it, which is I added some color correction. So if I turn on this layer, it's again an adjustment layer, so it's affecting everything underneath it. So I added a little bit of glow so that the lights in the background and the portal edges will glow. And then I added a LUT that I had. I can't remember. This is an interstellar LUT, just kind of like a LUT is a lookup table, so it basically kind of color corrects it for me based on the movie Interstellar, but not really. I just thought it kind of looked cool and added this cool tone to it, so I did that. And then I kind of dialed that LUT back a little bit with this composite, so it's not so greeny blue. And then just some brightness and contrast. And pretty much last is I added motion blur. So where is a good place for this? I'm not even sure anywhere is a good place for this. Oh, these are some pretty cool frames here with the cube in it. So if you look at the edges of the cube here, everything's just like crystal clear, basically. I did put it down to a really low quality, but there, everything's pretty much crystal clear, but the camera's moving fairly rapidly. So what I decided to do is add a plugin called RSMB, which stands for Real Smart Motion Blur. You do have to buy this plugin, but it basically takes a look at adjacent frames, so frames right next to each other, and kind of blurs in between them by a certain amount, kind of faking motion blur. So I'll turn that on. You'll see this blue progress bar here go really slow and think for a long time. But watch the cube. There we go. We got a little bit of blur on that. And that just adds a hint of realism when you're like flying through a portal or something like that. There's just that little bit of motion blur, and that just kind of ties the whole thing together. Another little trick I've learned from friends of mine is to add noise. So this is just a noise effect at 1%, and it just adds a little bit of grain to it. So let me just play the final here for you in After Effects. Yeah. Well, why is it doing that? Yeah, so that's kind of the final look. It's got the color grade on it. It's got the motion blur, I think, on it. Yeah, it should. And it's got just a little bit of grain. I don't know if I could pause it and like zoom in where like this black isn't like pure black, where without the grain it kind of would be. There's like a little bit of grain here. And that just kind of makes it feel like an actual camera shot it more than anything, and it also breaks up if you have any funny glows or things. It kind of just tells the audience that this is more real. I mean, as you can kind of tell that the whole thing's CG, and if you're, I mean, any savvy basically, because the cube doesn't have enough bevel on it, like it's too sharp and all that stuff. But I don't know. That's kind of the whole gist of it. I'll hop you guys back over, maybe turn on the chat to this view, and I'm basically done. That's all I had to say, really. Let me take a look at my notes just in case I forgot something. But yeah, that's how I created this animation. It's looping animation. It took a lot of brain power, probably about a week's worth of work here in the present. In 2016, it was probably, I don't know, maybe another 4 days. So in total, this project was, yeah, a couple weeks at the most, which I'm really proud of. That seems really fast in my head to me. I mean, I can get stuff out pretty quickly, and I do a lot of stuff in a single day, because that's when I'm inspired. But for the most part, for something this complicated, a week is pretty quick. I could have gone quicker, because I did a lot of learning in the beginning. But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any questions or comments that you might want to here that I didn't cover? I'll just wait. I also didn't really cover anything about the sound design I did for it, which here I can fade that on for you right now. And I didn't really, actually that might be too loud here. Let me back it off a little bit. I did a little bit of sound design, so if you want to hear about that, I could go into that, but that might be a little long. Because we are approaching 2 hours on this stream. So yeah, I'll just wait if you guys had any questions, because I know there is a delay, but it's basically, that's all I had to say. Wait a second, I should say thank you for watching and staying with me this long if you have, and thank you for commenting. I know there's not that many comments, but I enjoy seeing the people who did stop by, and please, if you want to, check it out again when I have another project coming up. I hope to do this again and break down maybe another scene in the future. Okay, well, thank you all so much for watching and joining in on the stream. I had a blast doing this, and I really hope to do this again in the future. And this one might have been a little awkward because it is my first one. And I hope everything went smoothly on your end, and it felt like you learned something, because that's what I really want. So thank you for watching and staying this long if you have, and yeah, see you next time.